Good evening and welcome to NTD UK News. I'm Stuart Lees and here are today's top stories. The number of people illegally crossing the English Channel on small boats has passed 10,000 this year. On Wednesday, a record number of 482 people reached England this way. The number of self-isolation alerts sent out by the NHS COVID-19 app dropped 43% in the last week of July. And we'll be talking to experts about the ethical implications of the government's planned vaccine passports. More than 10,000 people have reached England by crossing the Channel in small boats this year. And despite government attempts to reduce the illegal crossings, the numbers keep rising. NTD's John Robson has a story.
The Home Office confirms over 480 people crossed the Dover Strait on 21 boats on Wednesday. This is a new record for a single day. More people arrived on Thursday. Dozens of migrants, including children, were intercepted and brought ashore by Border Force. The crossings have resumed in recent days, following a period of bad weather. More than 10,000 people have crossed the English Channel in small boats in 2021, despite the dangers involved. Two groups of migrants were seen at the lifeboat station on Wednesday afternoon. One group said they were from Iran and Afghanistan and had fled religious persecution. The second group included people from Vietnam and Eritrea. Home Secretary Priti Patel has repeatedly vowed to make the route unviable, but crossings have continued to rise. Last month, Patel announced an agreement to more than double the number of police patrolling French beaches, with the government to pay France £54 million. But it's not easy to prevent the crossings. Footage shot Wednesday at the break of dawn on a beach in northern France shows a dozen migrants quietly jumping onto an inflatable dinghy. A man helps them by pushing the dinghy in waist-deep water. French police say their ability to stop this is limited. There are too many migrants, the coast is too long, and the smugglers are too skilled.
Our objective is to stop any attempts to leave before they head out. Here today we're observing the entire coastline to detect any vessels ready to go to sea, and to engage ground patrols to intercept before they go to sea. For us, once they are at sea, it's basically too late. We can accompany them, escort them, but it becomes purely a rescue mission.
The Home Secretary was in Greece this week to discuss shared challenges on illegal migration. The Home Office says she met the Greek Migration Minister, visited a newly built migration reception centre and learned how Greece prevents small boat crossings. At their closest point, England and France are just over 20 miles apart. Despite the obvious dangers, the trip is tempting for many. Joanne Robson, NTD News.
The number of people being told to self-isolate by the NHS COVID app has fallen dramatically. That's even before the app was tweaked to be less sensitive. NTD's Trevor Piper has more on this.
Data published by the NHS shows the COVID-19 app sent about 388,000 isolation alerts between July the 22nd and 28th. This represents a 43% drop on the previous week, which saw a record 690,000 alerts. The number of check-ins to venues using the app also dropped significantly. There were 2.4 million check-ins in the week to July 28th in England and Wales, down 65% on the previous week. Experts say the main reason for the sharp decrease in alerts is a fall in virus cases. But some acknowledge there could also be some people who stop using the app. On Monday, the government announced the app was being updated so fewer people will be instructed to isolate. Instead of checking contacts for 5 days before a positive test, the app will go back 2 days. In July, the app sent out over 2 million alerts, leaving businesses suffering due to isolating staff. Though the isolation alerts sent out by the app are not legal requirements, the government strongly advises people to follow them. Trevor Piper, NTD News.
A Jewish charity says British Jews suffered the worst level of anti-Semitic hatred in decades following the Gaza conflict in May. NTD's Natalia Nutting brings us the story.
In its latest report, Jewish group, the Community Security Trust, recorded more than 1,300 anti-Jewish hate incidents in the UK in the first half of 2021. This amounts to an almost 50% increase from last year and is the highest figure ever recorded since the group started compiling the data in 1984. The surge in anti-Semitic hate incidents followed the Gaza conflict in May, when Israel bombed Hamas targets in retaliation against the Islamic terrorist group's rocket attacks on Israeli civilians. The conflict triggered anti-Israeli protest in the UK and led to a wave of anti-Jewish hate incidents. In one incident, the Metropolitan Police arrested 4 men for shouting anti-Semitic abuse in the streets of London. In another, 2 men were arrested after a rabbi was attacked near his synagogue in North London. The report recorded 130 hate incidents involving schools and said many Jewish school children and teachers felt fearful about returning to their schools. Universities were also affected, with 84 anti-Semitic incidents involving students, academics or student unions. The incidents were condemned by UK politicians from across the spectrum. Prime Minister Boris Johnson said at the time, "There is no place for anti-Semitism in our society." He said he stands with Britain's Jews who should not have to endure this kind of shameful racism. Natalia Nutting, NTD News.
As the government plans to make full vaccination a requirement to get into some crowded settings, we take a look at the ethical implications of vaccine passports. NTD's Jen Worrell speaks with a professor of medical ethics and a reader in bioethics who have different views.
Under government plans, people will need to show that they're fully vaccinated to go into crowded spaces like nightclubs from the end of September.
Full vaccination.
The Prime Minister has said a negative test won't be sufficient. The exact details on venues are yet to be announced. But what are the ethical implications? I spoke with 2 experts who are both members of the UK Pandemic Ethics Accelerator. They have differing views.
So I'm not against the idea of monitoring vaccination status across the population as a public health measure and of perhaps in certain limited circumstances restricting people's movements based on whether or not they've had the vaccination. But I think we need to stop talking about vaccine passports. So if you think about it, the idea of a passport, even the language of passports, is about our identity, about our entitlements as citizens, about our fundamental rights within society. And so the idea that we would make that contingent on someone's biomedical status really is introducing a sort of form of biocitizenship by surveillance that I think has very worrying implications.
Some people I've spoken to recently who are willing to get a vaccine changed their mind after hearing Boris Johnson's announcement that people will need to be double jabbed to enter nightclubs.
I have zero problem with taking the vaccines. It's just when I'm being forced to, I will not do it.
If the idea behind talking about the nightclub policy is to try and get more people vaccinated, this might not work. They might not get people to get the jab.
So I don't think personally that vaccine passports are or should be motivated by trying to persuade, bully or coerce people into getting vaccinated. Vaccine passports might be an ethical stepping stone in a situation where we haven't got rid of the virus, we're not out of the pandemic yet, but we're wanting to return to more normal life. And in that setting, it makes sense that those who are immune might be able to do a different range of things than those who are not immune. So those who've had the vaccine might be able to, for example, gather in clubs in large numbers and confined spaces. That potentially is going to be a much lower risk of a super spreader event than if you've got a similar number and density of people, some of whom are not immunized.
But then there's a difference between immunity and vaccinated, isn't there? Because vaccination doesn't mean people are immune.
Well, if you've had 2 doses of the vaccine, you're both at lower personal risk of illness and, as I understand it, at significantly lower risk of spreading the virus. So that's the reason for treating those who've had the vaccine differently. That's the reason for encouraging the vaccine, that we want people to protect themselves and also to protect other people. So there are a range of different reasons why clubs might choose to take up these sort of passport certification schemes. I think it's always important, wherever we're using them, to think about what are the alternatives for those who, for whatever reason, are not vaccinated. In particular, those who have a medical exemption, a medical reason why they can't be vaccinated or to be exempt from some of these policies. It's not fair for them to be perhaps restricted. Those who have chosen not to have a vaccine might need to provide other evidence that they aren't at risk of passing on the virus, or they may need to take other precautions, for example, greater social distancing, continuing to use masks, etc.
Sarah Chan says the system is risky as it could increase the injustices in society that already exist.
I think dividing us into the vaccinated and the unvaccinated at this broad social level, I think, if anything, is likely to increase divisions within society, using it as effectively a form of coercion to say you can't do this, you can't go here, you can't do that if you're not vaccinated, I think is liable to entrench resistance amongst people who may have doubts about the vaccine in the first place. We know that many public health measures or interventions around COVID have become politicized. So look, for example, at mask wearing, at compliance with lockdowns. If we go about dividing the population into essentially the risky and the safe, the wills and the won'ts, I think that's, if anything, going to entrench those divisions. And we know that the nature of the debate is likely to become polarized. Social media, of course, makes this even worse. So if the aim of introducing vaccine passports is to try and increase the vaccination rate, I think we really need to question whether that's actually going to work.
MPs will be voting on a vaccine passport system when Parliament reopens. While the exact details of the vote are yet to be decided, the ministers are likely to face resistance from both sides of the benches. Jane Werrell, NTD News, London.
Today, the top court in France approved the country's COVID pass, which will be brought in on Monday. It means that those who have not been vaccinated or tested negative for the CCP virus will be refused entry to cafes, restaurants, trains and planes. Plans for the controversial pass have met with strong resistance. Some 200,000 people marched through towns and cities across France in a third weekend of protests last Saturday, and more are planned. Over to Italy now, where people are preparing for tomorrow's launch of their own pass. NTD's Trevor Piper brings us this report.
The number of people getting vaccinated in Italy has risen sharply in recent days. The country is set to introduce the Green Pass on Friday, also known as the Health Pass in other European countries.
There has certainly been an increase in vaccine bookings, and therefore in the inoculations of doses. We have seen an increase in bookings, especially in the days following the news that the Green Pass would come into effect.
Vaccination bookings at Rome's Auditorium have doubled. People were in line from early morning on Thursday to get their jabs. Some are in favour of the pass.
I believe the vaccine is the only way out of this situation. I am scientifically ignorant and I rely on science. I think it's the only thing to do, and so I agree with the introduction of the Green Pass. People who don't want to be vaccinated are making a choice, but we who have been vaccinated have also made a choice. It's right to protect those who have been vaccinated, so they aren't locked up again.
The pass shows whether someone has been vaccinated, tested negative or recovered from COVID-19. It will be required to access public spaces such as bars, restaurants, gyms and cinemas. But not everyone agrees with the government's decision. The country saw a series of protests last week from those who see the pass as a limit on their personal freedoms.
Regardless of whether or not a person has been vaccinated, each of us has the right and the freedom to choose the treatment. I am free to choose what is best for my health.
The government was also expected to announce on Thursday that the Green Pass would become a requirement of schools, as well as for long-distance travel. Trevor Piper, NTD News.
Still to come, the government moves France to the amber list from Sunday and says travel restrictions won't be changing again for another 3 weeks.
It means that people should be able to go away, enjoy their holidays without looking over their shoulders the whole time.
The government further lifts travel restrictions, with France set to join the amber list from Sunday. Those entering England from France who are fully vaccinated or under 18 will not be required to self-isolate. Meanwhile, other countries such as India are removed from the red list. NTD's Neil Wardray brings us the details.
Transport Secretary Grant Shapps announced that restrictions are being eased or limited for people arriving in England, Scotland or Northern Ireland from several countries from 4 a.m. Sunday. Paris will join the rest of the EU countries on the amber list.
I'm very pleased that we've got a situation now where France is normalised in terms of being able to be treated like all other amber countries, meaning people can come back and they don't have to self-isolate. Having been to France, it's just the day 2 test that's still required, and a test before they leave France.
The day 2 test is the PCR test that needs to be purchased by the traveller. The government says it has moved France to the amber list after case numbers of the Beta or South African variant fell. France became the only Amber Plus country in mid-July. With just 2 days' notice, even fully vaccinated people had to quarantine, prompting an outcry from the travel industry. Will the changes this time be more secure for travellers?
Never say zero chance with coronavirus, but having said that, the levels of vaccination and what we now know about the virus and what our scientists have been able to work out in the last year means that people should be able to go away, enjoy their holidays without looking over their shoulders the whole time.
There had been worries that Spain, the top tourist destination for Brits, would be added to the Amber Plus list. Instead, the government is advising arrivals from Spain to take a PCR test pre-departure, rather than a cheaper lateral flow test. The Transport Secretary said PCR tests would help clinicians and scientists in the UK and Spain to keep a very close eye on the spread of the Beta variant. 7 nations will be added to the quarantine-free green list, including Germany, Austria and Norway. There are also changes to the red list countries. These are places the UK government says present the highest COVID risk and should not be visited except in the most extreme of circumstances. The cost of the hotel quarantine will increase for solo travellers from £1,750 to £2,285. Additional adults sharing a room will see their bill more than double, from £650 to £1,430. There are 4 countries being removed from the red list to amber, including India. I spoke with a travel firm owner who says India is not ready for tourism and she won't be recommending it to her clients. She said, "We are eager to get back to normal, but only once it is safe to do so, and as yet it's not." She said the vaccine is not getting out to the average man in India yet, let alone the villagers in her bespoke tours. The government's travel advice to India webpage highlights the recent rise in COVID cases as well as the under-pressure healthcare system. Anyone looking to visit should check the airline websites prior to travel. Neil Woodrow, NTD News, London.
The Belarusian sprinter who refused to go back to her country after competing at the Tokyo Olympics has safely arrived in Poland. She said she decided to defect because her family told her it wasn't safe to return. NTD's Eddie Aitken has more on this.
Krystyna Siemnaskaya arrived in Poland on Wednesday after a brief stop in the Austrian capital Vienna. The 24-year-old sought diplomatic protection in Tokyo on Monday, refusing to board a flight back to her homeland. At a press conference in Warsaw on Thursday, she said the Belarusian Olympic team tried to force her to go home early after she criticized her coaches. But she decided to defect after her grandmother told her she could be put in a prison or mental hospital in Belarus.
When I pick up my clothes and go to the car, my grandmother, she called me and she said, "You can't come back to home because on the TV they say a lot of bad words about you, that you have some mental problems." And maybe you can go to some hospital in Belarus or maybe to jail, we don't know.
Poland has granted her a humanitarian visa. Her husband has also left Belarus and should soon reunite with her.
I feel myself much better that here. I feel that I'm in safety, and a lot of people support me here. And my husband, he's already in a road by car to the Poland, so I will wait him today in the evening. He will be here, maybe with me. So.
The incident has focused renewed attention on the political situation in Belarus, a former Soviet state under authoritarian rule. Police there have cracked down on dissent, following a wave of protest triggered by an election last year. Idyllic, NTD News.
Soups, sausages and cake, and all for free. For a young entrepreneur in a village hit by floods in western Germany, his food truck has become something like a local pub and a supermarket in one. NTD's John Robson has more.
The floods in western Germany in July hit the town of Rech hard. Several houses and the main bridge are gone. At first they had no electricity and phone connection, and drinking water still gets delivered via trucks. This entrepreneur was in the right place at the right time. Usually he drives around the area and sells produce out of his food truck. The floods changed that.
It is currently not possible in the Ahr Valley because I've lost many of my locations here. I said I would not give up, and my help is needed locally. Because I have the truck, why shouldn't I just pack food and drive to the places where it is needed?
When Schlottau arrived in Rech, the village had not received any deliveries for 2 days.
There was nothing here yet. There was no food. There were no drinks here on Saturday, and it had actually been a disaster since Thursday.
Schlottau gave out his food for free to residents and volunteers. At first he paid for it with his own money.
Yes, we cooked soup at home and threw sausages in the pot, ordered rolls and just went. And then, day by day, this has become more and more known among friends and acquaintances. We advertised on social media.
Steadily, donations came in and volunteers showed up. His truck has become something like a local pub and supermarket in one. It's where people meet over a hot soup or a piece of cake.
That's quite a bit that goes out here, and every smile is worth it.
Meanwhile, he has also put 2 buildings in the village into operation. The former bakery has been stacked with hygiene items, rubber boots and tools, and on the other side, in the former electrical shop, there is now a drinks market. All free of charge and financed by donations. Schlottau wrote on Instagram that he will stay in Rech at least until the middle of August. Joanne Robson, NTD News.
Huge quantities of litter are spoiling a beautiful Ukrainian area and the river that runs through it. Volunteers are trying to clean up, but the problem requires a much bigger solution. NTD's Joy Duguid has more on this.
From the air, Yasnaya in Ukraine looks like an idyllic mountain village. But get closer to the ground and the truth is not so pretty. This area has a serious waste problem. A dozen volunteers from Hungary are helping clean up as the rubbish will eventually end up in their country.
Rubbish from Ukraine comes into Hungary through the Tisza River, as well as tributaries of the Somosh River. This is also rubbish from Romania.
The Tisza flows through 5 countries, but most of the river's pollution comes from Ukraine. According to local authorities, Carpathian residents produce more than 300 tons of rubbish per year. Local landfills are full. Waste is piling up with nowhere to go.
Unfortunately, we don't have a centralised collection system for this rubbish. We cannot collect 100% of all rubbish from all members of the community because we do not have a landfill site.
At the start of 2021, Ukrainian authorities announced they found 42 illegal waste dumps. Local people have begun recycling initiatives. At this facility, cardboard is recycled.
Collecting a load like this, I save 1 fir tree from being cut down in our country. Before I started to recycle, it was all burned. Now I started to work, and already I can save 1 fir tree.
Cleaning up this mountain countryside will require more recycling and disposal facilities. In 2020, Hungarian President János Áder twice addressed his Ukrainian counterpart to sort out the rubbish problem. But so far, no solution has been agreed. Joy Dugid, NTD News.
That's the news for today, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Stuart Lees. Thank you for watching our daily news show on YouTube. You can also watch our other programming on channel 190 on Sky TV or on Freeview via channel box on channel 271. In the meantime though, please give this video a like and hit subscribe to our channel. Have a good day.